And so it begins. Probably imperfect, likely with room for growth, but certainly packed with relevant, up-to-date business news, technology-focused stories and developments, human interest discussions and encounters that will surprise you. That's not clickbait, that's a commitment. I'm Howard Feldman, and this is the first episode of Synthesis TV. How did we get here? Like all things, we evolved. We began with podcasts, webinars, and live demos, and then we followed your lead. Our thousands of subscribers and weekly viewers told us that they wanted more, and so we put our heads together and we designed the answer to your query. A weekly 20 to 30-minute episode that'll move at pace and offer a variety of conversations and provide exposure to cutting-edge technology. Full disclaimer, I'm not a tech guy. I only speak English, and I am the last person who should be hosting this. But the flip side is that I'm guaranteed to understand less than you do. Who is Synthesis? Synthesis is a leading software development company designed to make your business more competitive. Welcome to Synthesis TV.
This is Synthesis TV, keeping you on the edge of technology and business.
Kimberley Taylor, founder and CEO of Loop. Good morning. Thanks for joining us. How are you?
Good. Thank you for having me.
Well, Synthesis TV is just launching, so the fact that you are our lead is really cool. How does it feel?
It feels really cool. I like being first. I always say things are competition.
Absolutely. Oh, I like that. That's one way of doing things. And but you've always been first, it would seem. It seems innovation and front running is your thing.
Yeah. I mean, not always first, but I think always aiming for more and like better and more creativity. Yeah.
So where does that come from? Because, I mean, you were in third year engineering when you solved a major logistics problem with your algorithm. I mean, we've read about that in the press. You've done lots of interviews. It really did take you forward. And I know it was a number of years ago, but that really does indicate most of us at university were just actually trying to survive maybe the night before and the next exam. You were solving real issues.
Yeah. I think I have a very curious mind. I think it's part of my journey, like that, always wanting to understand. Maybe that engineering side, right? Understand how things work. I think as students, we think that the real world is really high tech and like businesses have it all together. And that curiosity really paid off because I was really interested in whether this was actually being used. And, in that investigation, started understanding the problem further. And, that's what kind of...
Do you... we often have this conversation and we're told, and a lot of, from a business perspective, we often look at the problem and we fall in love with the problem in order to find the solution, not instead of being afraid of the problem. Have you always been attracted to the problem?
Yes, definitely.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so throughout, I mean, just growing up, I think just the way I look at the world, right? I think the way I look at the circumstances that were given to me, right, that you were born into, and I just always believed I could make them better, create more, be more, right? And
did you have challenges as a kid?
Yeah, I mean, definitely non-ideal circumstances.
Oh, really? Okay.
But I think that formed like the tools that gave me the ability to want more from my life, and I guess, and again, solve problems, right?
Starting off with your own.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. So it's a fascinating thing because we often have this discussion. I think South Africans are incredibly creative. Yeah. I think we solve problems here that the rest of the world doesn't exist. We live with adversity. We can't drive to the studio without coming across people at traffic lights who are vulnerable and displaced and who are suffering in great, great ways. We confront adversity literally at every traffic corner.
Yeah.
And I always think that has borne a creativity that is incredible when we look at what South Africans have achieved, what people like you have achieved. Do you think that we need adversity to create?
It's such an interesting question because it's something that I think about all the time, because I think yes.
Okay.
And I want to carry on and say, but it also hurts me, right? That there is suffering.
Sure, we didn't choose it.
And that's, and I always think, well, do I have to have kids? If my kids grow up in a better, more stable home, like, does that mean that they're not going to have the same tools that I have, right? You know what I mean? So, like, adversity.
It's such an interesting thing, yeah.
Yeah. Yesterday, I listened to a podcast, and on a side note, just about adversity and creating, and she went on this darkness retreat, and at some point she talks about this line where it's basically she spends 4 days in the darkness, right? So
oh my word, I actually can't breathe. I feel, I don't know, that's hectic.
Very, very hectic and interesting. She's talking through a journey. And at one point she just says the magic of the darkness is that her mind, what she could see in the darkness, whatever she could create to see, right?
Right.
And I thought that's so interesting because I often feel like I have been in places of darkness, and in those places, when I'm in my mind, I visualize like a different world, right? And that's you just talk about union adversity to create, and it's so interesting. I think that in places of darkness, there is this ability that's born to potentially visualize things differently, right? And yeah, so it's
so it gives us, in a way, it gives us a form of optimism because we dream, we visualize a better place for ourselves, a better world, and it teaches us the resilience.
Yeah. So it's literally something I heard yesterday, and I was just playing around with that thought of how often did I spend those times
in darkness?
Yes, and
would you be comfortable sharing any of those dark times with us?
Yeah, I think so. Maybe not in depth, but I mean, I think
however you're comfortable. It's just it becomes something that we can all relate to.
Yeah,
because we all have darkness, and we've all lived through darkness, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think it came from moments of when I was younger, I was sexually abused. That was one of the moments.
Well, you don't get much darker than that.
Yeah. That I've had to navigate, right? And that's been a challenge. I think grew up in a home with a lot of chaos. And I'm almost sensitive because I also love my family, my mom, but my mom, as an incredible woman as she is, also made decisions, right? I think that affected the environment that we grew up in. So a bit of chaos, violence,
It had it all.
like
sex,
drugs, and rock and roll.
Right, it's not a PG movie, your youth.
Yes.
Yeah,
and so I think I see in reflection, I wrote a lot. So I spent a lot of time writing, processing, drawing, a lot of time in my head, And the more I think back and kind of put the puzzle pieces together, I think that time that I spent in my head constantly conceiving of a different world for me, but also and this is where, like, my mom also, she's actually Brazilian, grew up in Brazil and in very poor circumstances. Also, like I was just so aware of suffering on different levels, right? My mom's South
So
Africa.
you were watching out for people around you as well.
Yes.
It wasn't only your own suffering.
Yes.
You had the ability to look out and in.
Yes. And just always wanting more, right? Wanting, and it's like I almost can't go past someone on the side of the road and not want happiness for them, or like think about what could we create that would make a difference, right? And I have lots of different stories around that. I mean,
but it's so interesting because you still, if I had to ask you where the strength came from, what would you think? Was it your mom, even though she might have made not great decisions along the way?
I do think so.
Yeah.
Honestly, I look back and obviously I've had a relationship of up and down with my mom.
Of course.
Now I'm
anger, I'm sure at times. You let down.
Anger, absolutely. Right. I mean, just not being able to be in that space. Now I have just the most gratitude and awe of the woman she is. And I actually think the power that I feel as who I am, I was given. I often feel like it was a gift that I've inherited from my mom, right? Because she is an incredibly strong woman, right? If we look at the circumstances that she grew up in versus what she gave us, she lifted her life, right? And that's what I think is amazing. And now my opportunity to again lift from that.
So then do you ever feel... And I don't mean it as a judgmental negative thing, because I think we do make judgments all the time and we need to. That's how that's how we do better. But do you ever look at people, for example, when you're at varsity or when you read popular social media and people are complaining about the most inane things? Do you ever look at them and say, what is wrong with you? You don't know what real adversity is.
Truthfully, no.
I knew you were going to say no. That's why I wanted the question. But I think that's incredible because I didn't grow up with those circumstances and I judge. So it was just amazing that you don't.
I definitely have some judgments that I'm constantly working through. Like I constantly find myself confronted by like, oh, I made that judgment of this person. Like I'm doing this course at the moment. And one of the people in the course is a sex worker, and you find yourself judging what, like, do you know what I mean? And so I definitely, maybe I have at some point judged, of course. But I think slowly I try to like eat away at those judgments. I'm like, no,
it's a question that irritates me to even ask because I feel it's offensive. If there was a young guy sitting here who had achieved something, I'd never say to him, what's it like to be a young guy in this space? But when you've spoken about the fact that you have experienced sexual assault, you've dealt with things that obviously are not particular only to women, the young guys that experience this too. But unfortunately, whether we acknowledge, whether we like it or not, there's gender-based violence in South Africa is a major issue, and it's not just physical; it's emotional as well. It exists in all sorts of places. So I apologize for the question because the question irritates me, but I feel it's relevant. Has this been a challenge for you, given your circumstances? Given the fact that engineering is traditionally not a women's common to women, or to that extent, have you experienced this as a difficulty?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I've had to constantly work through that situation and how it's formed my judgments, my loss of power, right? And in different circumstances. And not just that. I mean, you can lose your power or give your power over to men in very different ways, right? I mean, as women, we say sorry. We just play small.
And when I assist people with body language, men often, and I deal with women in the workplace, it's a very common thing that men will walk up to women and do that, and then you've got to shake hands almost like it's a little bit subservient. And how do you take that control and power back? So it happens on many, many different levels.
Yeah.
So it is something that exists.
Yeah, and it's been a difficult thing to navigate. I mean, there've been times in the beginning where it was very difficult, where I was ignored or not taken seriously. I mean, and still today, like it's not, there's not this equal power play or level playing field there. I'm constantly having to navigate, how do I create boundaries, create that, like, the sense of I am a strong, powerful businesswoman, like equally, an equal, to have respect. And so, and not,
and not dominate either.
And not dominate either.
You don't want to become the very thing that you are trying to deal with.
Absolutely. Because I think that being the feminine businesswoman is also powerful, right?
Absolutely.
I think navigating, I love being female and feminine and more nurturing and more emotional.
And why should you have to give that up?
Yeah. And I think that's your power as a woman. I think that gives us a lot more power as like leaders and completely different way to men in the workplace. So I've definitely had to navigate not losing that side, but still maintaining a sense of respect and boundaries. And
So when we look at South Africa, given this background and this incredible journey that you've been on and evolved to, and the good work that you've already done, when you look at this canvas that is South Africa, and I'd like to say blank canvas, but it isn't, because there's some really bad smudge marks on that canvas already. Where do you go from here in terms of fixing some of the challenges that we have? If I had to ask you, what do you think the biggest challenge to this country is? So
I couldn't say, I don't know. For me, I think it's job creation, right? I don't feel like, there's a lot of people that are living in circumstances where they just can't eat, right? Or feed themselves and just live a dignified life. And I also know how debilitating it is to not have money, right? It is all-consuming, debilitating.
It's very hard to think of anything else.
Yeah, you can't.
How do you think of anything else?
You can't create, right? You're just trying to survive. And that's a dark place. Right. It's a very dark place to survive. So for me, obviously, one of the things is job creation. Where I see my play, something that I'm constantly trying to figure out, right? I think I was given this gift to like solve problems, and there's places where I feel completely in flow, right? Like solving business problems and people. There's things that give me energy, and I'm always hoping that they lead to this, inevitably, this thing that allows me to get people more jobs. Do you know what I mean?
Because that deals with so many of these things. And the minute people have jobs, they have a little bit more dignity.
Yes.
They can create more. They can create more jobs.
Yeah.
That's really what it's about. That's our number one. That is the number one challenge. And how do we go about doing that?
Yeah. So is that a question? So there's a couple of ways. I can tell you what 11-year-old Kim thought.
I would love to hear what 11-year-old Kim thought.
So I did yoga last week, and I had this memory for a second of when I was younger. I used to write down jobs that people didn't need an education for. I literally had a list.
That's at 11?
At 11.
What was wrong with you?
No, I like way better than the person I am now. She was like, she honestly was just, she was intense. She was an intense
couldn't have been fun
girl.
at parties, that 11-year-old.
No, I wasn't. I was very intense. I can show you some of the things I used to write at 11.
That's unbelievable.
They were intense.
Incredible.
And I used to kind of imagine that one day my role was going to be to find and collect these people that didn't have jobs.
I think 11-year-old Kim was right. I think she was a smart kid, that one.
Yeah, and help them, right? Incredible. And these things that they didn't need education to do, right? That could, and I literally had things like, I know washing hair was one of the things on the list. Right.
At 11, that makes sense. Even today, it makes sense, actually. Yeah. It's a good one.
Like things that you could do. I mean, I was obviously very naive, but so, now a little bit older.
Right. We won't say how old, but it doesn't, because it's an irrelevant. But present, Kimberley.
Yes, present Kimberley.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously, I hope that through building businesses, right,
Yeah.
it's going to create opportunities for more job creation. But aside from that, there is some essence of what there's an essence, there's another side that I'm almost hoping just clicks one day, right? Where I just know that there are these jobs, and how do you place people? Because it's not just about placing people into these jobs. I think about like when you in Cape Town, right? And you drive past a mother on the side of the road and the trauma that she's had to endure. I also hope that one day my mind will just figure it out. But I think that for me, and this is why I know I have to do that inner work, is because if I don't understand how to work through trauma, how do I understand how other people are possibly going to go from on the streets, which I can't even imagine the trauma, to then holding a job, right? Because it's not just about now, okay, here's a job where you don't need an education, but here you keep this job. I mean, the skill set, the trauma, the things that have kept them on the streets also probably need to be solved in some way. I don't know if that makes sense.
So in other words, dealing with that, to some extent, collective trauma that so many millions of South Africans have had,
Yes.
in order to move forward and actually to give people the desire to move forward.
Yes.
Because I would imagine that living under those circumstances bashes you every single day, that you actually don't, that it's hard to imagine a world that isn't that.
Absolutely. I mean, the fear, the violence, the threat. I mean, I can't even understand what it must feel like to have to daily have to focus on surviving on an even more basic level.
So we know there's no doubt that given who you are, your track record, the way in which you deal with these issues, that you fall in love with the problems. What do you foresee for the future for you and for South Africa? How do we, because we definitely have the potential, we've got incredible people, we've got a kindness and an empathy and a creativity, and we've got a humor. We've got a sense of humor that I think most parts of the world don't have.
They definitely don't.
South Africans are properly funny. We're funny people. And even with Eskom, we can laugh in the dark, which is an incredible thing. Most countries would be horrified at the thought, but yet we do. What do you foresee? Yeah, what do you foresee? Paint the beautiful picture, the potential for this country.
Jeepers, I don't know. I hope that we constantly move forward, right? And for me, I mean, yes, that there would be some sort of elevation in terms of people's spirits, but I also, I think it's an endless journey to some degree, right?
Of course, because we can always do better.
Yeah. I mean, of course, I would love, I'm constantly searching for more peace, more inner peace, right? So like my only hope is that could be felt by more people. I think more than having a job first, it's feeling that inner peace, right? Working through that trauma. So I don't know if that's a good answer, but
it's an answer. Well, maybe that is, because finding peace with ourselves, actually maybe that does free us to be able to take the next steps forward.
And I only say it because I can't be naively optimist and say I can't. Yes, I can say the world I would love to see, the South Africa I would love to see, but there's a part of me that knows that I want is not possible. So it's more
only
about,
some of it is, or even a large amount of it is, but not all of it.
Yeah, and it's more about progress, right? And that's what you always say in business, like progress over perfection, right? It's just like, how do we just continually progress and continue to show empathy and kindness, and I am seeing and experiencing more and more and more of that, which I'm so grateful for, and I find it quite calming, right? Just some of the interactions I've had recently where I'm just meeting more people with more resources that are genuinely dedicated to solving more of these issues, which is so incredible, right? I mean, it's amazing to know that these people exist in South Africa,
and I love that. I think there is a title, is progress over perfection, because that's what it's about. As long as we're taking steps every single day towards that, we'll never get there. It's about the journey anyway. It's about the progress.
Absolutely.
And not a perfection. Unfortunately, we're not only over time, we are way over time.
Sorry.
But I've loved this conversation and I wasn't prepared to stop it. Kimberley Taylor, thank you for such a fascinating conversation, and I look forward to having you back here on Synthesis TV as we evaluate, boast, and just celebrate the progress that we make one step at a time towards perfection.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.